Hi guys, welcome to the video, and today I'm talking about stretching and why I'm not a big fan of it. And I'm going to take this from several different angles. I've had experience of different kinds of stretching through my 20s and 30s as an athlete, and I'm going to take it from the research aspect of it as well. Let's get off to the start of what does stretching work to improve flexibility. Yes, it does. It's proven. I found it myself. I improved my flexibility with it. What I have a problem with it is its implications of it after you stretch, and the long-term aspect of stretching, and whether it improves sports performance and whether it improves you as a sprinter. That's where I have the big problem with. For me personally, I've had a few problems. I've got very limited benefits from stretching. Does it improve? For me, in terms of injury, in terms of imbalances, it didn't help me at all, but I'll go into that later on in the video. The first thing, let's talk about the research towards it, and there's a fair bit. In terms of the papers that I've looked at, they've established that the fact that there's very little solid evidence that stretching leads to improve sports performance, and there's very little evidence or solid evidence that it prevents injury. And those two things are why we do stretching in the first place. There's an aspect of, the aspect of feeling good after it, which I'll go into later as well. And I've benefited from it. I've felt the benefits in terms of how I feel in terms of relaxation as well, but there's better ways of doing it. The reason why I'm not a massive fan of the research actually shows why it's so bad. It's actually because it's detrimental as well. Not only is there's lack of evidence to show the sports performance and the injury, it's shown to be detrimental to your sports performance as well. If you think about, let's think about the aspects of elastic band. If you're constantly stretching it beyond what it wants to be, then it's going to break. Okay, it's going to weaken. It's going to lose its elasticity. And you don't want that as a sprinter. You need the power and elasticity in your joints and your muscles to react and have fast pace to create power. Elastic band, constantly stretched, is going to break. It's going to lose its kind of elasticity, and it's going to break. Okay, so that from that simple analogy, that should actually just give you an idea: is it beneficial for you? David H. Lally, there was a doctor from the University of Hawaii, did a study, and I know studies, the accuracy you take with a bit of pinch of salt, but in terms of the way it's pointing towards, it points you towards a certain aspects. They took 1,500 runners, marathon runners, I think they were, and he put half of them on stretching programs, warm-up stretching programs, passive stretching, and before their runs, and actually put the other half on not stretching. And what he found was the fact is that 47% of the runners that stretched and did passive stretching before running got injured, and 33%, I think it was, on the non-stretching side got injured. So there's 47% got injured on a non-stretching group, 33%. So there's a difference there. Okay, now obviously if you're a sprinter, you'll know your coach should have told you not to passive stretch before you train. Then we should know that as athletes, as sprinters, that passive stretching, static stretching, you don't want to be doing that before stretching. It doesn't do you. And specifically in strength training, you shouldn't do static stretching because it robs you of power. But if it does that, then what's the point of doing it at all? That's my thing. What's the point of doing the stretching at all? PNF stretching is probably a little bit different, a little bit better, which I've tried as well. But again, I don't think that should be used at all. So if it robs you of power before the race, and as in detrimental, and it increases the chance of injury by doing it before the race, what's the point of doing it at all? It obviously puts the body in a substandard state. So what's the benefits of it? Okay, so that's one study that it did it. There's another study that actually shows that all the studies are below in the description level, by the way. I've put them below so you can look at it. There's another one that shows that muscle activation in, I think it was the plantar flexors, is actually lowered. So the power output, the plantar flexors, is lowered by 20% by stretching. That coincides with why we don't stretch before power sports or before any kind of sport, because it just lowers your power output and you don't need that. So again, if the studies show that, then why would you actually do it at all? The problem is that power 20% that's lost in that muscle power it has to be picked up by the rest of the body. This is the thing. You stretch a muscle, but you're saying, oh, I'm just stretching that muscle. No, it has implications for the rest of the body. So you stretch a muscle, that has implications up in the upper body, that might tighten it, changes the body in such a way. It changes the muscle activation in such a way. Another study showed that it dampens the nervous system. So it's the connection with the muscle and the central nervous system, which is where the brain and the spinal cord that sends the messages to the muscle. If that's dampened, that's not good either. So that's detrimental. What I do as a Be Activated practitioner is I kind of heighten that kind of connection, messaging between the brain and the muscle. So the muscle just fires on demand of the brain, and it gets heightened. But stretching does the opposite, and you don't want the central nervous system messaging disrupted between the brain and the muscle, and that's what stretching does, and research has shown that. One other bit of research as well, we often think that, by stretching, we look at the most flexible people as the kind of place, we use that as a target that we want to get to. And I did as myself as an athlete. I wanted to be the fastest athlete I can be. And to do that, I thought I had to be the most flexible athlete I can be. That was back then. But we look at the most flexible people and we think, well, that's where we want to be because they must be less injured from the rest of us, which is not true either. The most flexible people are not lacking injuries. Okay, it doesn't happen like that. There's a research to show, again, this piece is down there. I think it was the US Army research. I think they found out, was it Bruce H. Jones? Might have been that one that actually showed that the people with lack flexibility, really tight as a board, and the people who have hypermobile got lots of flexibility, they got injured just as much on either side. So what you needed is more so, they were more likely to get injured on either side than they were other people in the middle. So that's what you want to aim for, that kind of natural flexibility that you have. Let's take a back flexibility, okay? I know the limitations. This is not exactly good scientific evidence, but as a person in the health and fitness industry, as a strength coach, as an athlete, I never came across someone with a super flexible back. They touch their toes and their hands could touch the ground and not have back problems. It looked to me that anybody who had a really flexible back had back problems because they lacked this instability. And that's research has shown again that the stability is affected as well. The proprioception, the kind of balance, your balance is affected by stretching, negatively affected. So you can't have those. As a sprinter, the minute changes makes a massive difference to your time and to whether you win or lose. You don't need those. You don't need those changes. You don't need a drop in 20% in power output of each muscle at any time, whether you've just finished a session at all, because that will cause compensation patterns. Remember, that 20% that's lost in that muscle has to be picked up by another muscle. That's how compensation happens. And the start of compensation patterns just gets exacerbated. And the compensation patterns will get bigger and bigger the longer you do stretching. Now, I would say, when you're probably thinking, well, look at the gymnasts and stuff like that, the most incredible athletes that they do. And yes, they probably do need to stretch. The kind of things that they do, the kind of movements are incredible. But they need to be able to be very flexible to do those movements. And probably to do that, the fastest way is to get flexible is to do the stretching. But again, these athletes are getting injured quite a bit, and the disc trouble that they get injured quite a lot as well. So, you can't look at those athletes, they're super incredible athletes, but they're not devoid of injury either. So just remember that even the most flexible get injured. So in that respect, what we're looking for is your own natural flexibility. That's what you should be looking for. Improving flexibility is something you should do. I'm just saying stretching shouldn't be the way you do it. In terms of the muscle activation method I use, Be Activated, we improve flexibility, the proper dynamic flexibility, but the proper flexibility through natural means, which in the way your body wants to take it. If you look at a muscle, the principle is, if you've got a tight muscle like a hamstring, and straight leg flexibility only goes to 45 degrees, Well, that muscle is tight for a reason. You need to understand that. Its muscle is tight for a reason. Stretching that muscle, what's the use in that? It's tight for a reason. You're treating the symptom, not the cause. The reason why it's tight is that all the muscles around in the hips have given up the ghost and basically left those hamstring muscles high and dry. And basically because of that, that's why it's tight and it's protecting itself. So what you need to do is activate the muscles around those muscles to release those hamstrings. That's what we do in Be Activated. That's what muscle activation does. Wakes up the muscles around so the muscles work together to give you more flexibility. And what happens is you find that natural flexibility. I'm not for the fact that I'm not for this. There's a physiotherapy test that you do or strength coach test you do that you should have hamstring flexibility at so range, or you should go to 120 degrees in terms of hamstring flexibility, or you should be able to do the overhead squat and things like that. I'm not for that. I mean, everybody's built differently. Everybody's got different flexibility. To say that, oh, everybody should go to that is ridiculous. Everybody's got a different flexibility, different joint structures, different hip structures, different joint structures. To say that everybody should have the same flexibility for me is just wrong. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't work like that. Everybody's built differently. So to that end, I don't see why the need to get to that point. What we want to do is find that natural flexibility for you as an athlete and work with that. The thing is, if you're worried about lack of flexibility, if you're worried about, well, if I train and I don't stretch, then I'm going to get tight. Well, you will if you don't work on your breathing and work on relaxation. If you work on your breathing and your relaxation, you go a long way to preventing those muscles getting muscle tightness. Breathing is that important. It plays a massive part on hip function because it pushes down, the diaphragm pushes down and connects with the psoas muscle, which is a kind of messenger to the hip. So you need to really work on your breathing and work on your relaxation. What do you think about? What stress is going through that? Remember, injury is exponentially raised by psychological stress. Injury rate is raised by psychological stress. That's something that a piece of research that's out there for decades that the physio industry for some reason don't take on board. That's where you want to be watching for injury, is making sure that you're lowering the stress in your life, how you handle challenges, how you handle what you're thinking about, and basically making sure that you're kind of centered. If you're centered, working on your breathing, you're doing the best thing for preventing tight muscles and getting too tight. One thing I found as an athlete myself is I've had experience of doing different kinds of stretching. I've done obviously the dynamic stretching, which is not too bad which should be done before you as a warm-up. I've done the static stretching, I've done the PNF stretching, and various other stretches and stuff like that. It's never helped sort out the problems for me. I've still got injured just the same amount, and research has shown that it makes no difference on the injury rate at all. But the other thing as well is the imbalances. I find that stretching, specifically hip flexors, takes my hips out of alignment and stuff like that, in terms of the hips start to tilt forward as well. And also the stress on the joint as well, or the tendons as well. We've got to think about that. The stretching of the muscle might be able to take that, but the tendons, not so much, not always. You have to think about that. So for me personally, I've had different imbalances. Stretching hasn't fixed that for me. I used to have an impingement on my shoulder from too many vanity weights, too much bench pressing when I was at university. And it got pain in my shoulder, which basically rotated my shoulder, this right shoulder forward. But it's so much so that when I used to run, I used to run like this, basically. So this elbow pointed outwards. I lacked flexibility on this side, on this arm. This arm was fine, this shoulder was fine, this arm wasn't. It lacked flexibility in the rotator cuff, it lacked flexibility in the lats as well. And that probably contributed to my hamstring injuries that I constantly got. But each time I did a lot of lat stretching, I did PNF stretching on various rotator cuff stretches as well. Did nothing for me. It didn't cure. I mean, if you think about it, if you've got imbalances where one joint is more flexible than the other, how's stretching going to improve that? There's an underlying problem that you need to fix there. That's not stretching's not going to do. You don't just stretch the tighter muscle more than the other. That, that again, you're stretching. You're trying to fix the symptom, not the cause. And what fixed me, what equaled up on both sides for both my shoulders wasn't stretching. It was the muscle activation, learning the breathing. The breathing was a massive thing for arm flexibility. I've done through in my previous video, the power of breathing, and I've also done numerous other videos on breathing as well, which you should go back and watch. But the stretching never equaled up, made me equal, and it never cured the actual flexibility issue, and never equaled up the imbalances issue. The only thing that did that was the muscle activation be activated and the breathing patterns as well. So this is just, stretching is seen by more coaches as sacrosanct. And I don't think it should have the relevance or the importance it has in training. I think it's a bit archaic. As I say, gymnasts and people like that probably need those flexible. MMA fighters or any mixed martial arts fighters probably need it as well, because they need that kind of flexibility to get the kicks. In that respect, for most other sports, we've got to find a better way than improving flexibility than actually, stretching. We don't really need it. We need to find our own natural flexibility that can only come about through various other aspects of maybe visual field, maybe be activated, which maybe breathing, and maybe relaxation. If relaxation brings about that dynamic flexibility you need, and that's the dynamic flexibility is what you need is the most important in sports performance, because that is the flexibility that passes over to sports performance. So that's what we need to be working on. And as I say, it shouldn't have the importance, and we should be questioning the actual importance of stretching and why we feel we have to stretch. When I'm warming down, I would put breathing exercise in relaxation straight after training. I do that any day above stretching, because you get the benefits of relaxing the body and promoting recovery, because you need to bring the parasympathetic system up as a dominant force to promote recovery, and that only comes from actually relaxing the body. Stretching has limited benefits to it, improves flexibility, but it doesn't improve sports performance. So how do you agree? You've probably got different experiences of stretching from me. If you have any experiences, if you disagree with me, why not go below, put a comment below. Do you agree with me? Just let's start the conversation going, because it really needs to be done there, and we really need to actually start thinking about it. And basically, that's the end of the video. Pretty long one today, but I had to. This subject needed to be expanded upon. I'm sure you realise it's actually quite important. If you could subscribe to my video, I would appreciate it. I'll be giving you more. I give more tips like this that instantly improve your speed, your relaxation, your performance. But just leaves me to say, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thanks for watching.